Last speaker of the day is Hornby Island's own Doug Chinnery, our fire chief, and a dedicated Hornby Island resident that has served as fire chief for the past 6 years, since 2017. And Doug, along with a team of about 30 dedicated volunteers, firefighters and paramedics, have consistently demonstrated his and the Hornby Island Fire Department's commitment to the community to provide extensive training and support during times of crisis. And I know one of the things that Doug has been doing more recently is responding to homeowners that want to have their property assessed for being fire smart. He's been to our property, our neighbors, and it's been very, very helpful. Anyway, Doug's dedication inspires others to join in. The fire department has grown almost doubled since he took over as chief, and we eagerly anticipate his valuable insights as to Hornby Island's preparedness for wildfire.
I want to thank Dr. Daniels for so articulately doing my presentation for me. Any more questions? She said something earlier that made me think. She talked about how we spend $1 billion this year not putting out a fire, and it made me think of the trope that goes around in the fire service, which is the way we put out forest fires is to dump money on it until the weather changes. Whose rig is this? Oh yeah, it's mine. I'm going to skip over really quickly a bunch of this stuff because it's been covered a few times. But really, what we're talking about here on Hornby is a WUI fire. That's our big hazard. That's what's going to happen when we end up with a wildfire event here on Hornby. So WUI is the wildland-urban interface. And we've since broken it down into a couple of different subcategories. We've got an intermix zone and an interface zone. And I would suggest that on Hornby we fit more into the intermix category. So WUI fire is really where the wildfire hits the urban fuel, or vice versa. You could have a house fire that then spreads off into the wildfire environment or the wildland environment, and it's all the same. It's all fire. So one of the things that's interesting about the photo on the right is that the house is pretty much fully involved, but the trees aren't really on fire. That's going to be a theme for the next couple slides. Sometimes that works. All right, I think we need new batteries. Brianna, can I get you to just advance the next slide? I'll give you, I'll pull my ear or something and you can...
Is there video on this already?
Oh, no, there shouldn't be. Oh, you had it? Yeah, maybe my clicker will work now. People started taking notice in 2003 in the big Kelowna fires. And what we're sort of seeing is some stuff like this, where here's a couple of houses that are gone in the middle of that, and there's a bunch of houses that are still standing. Most of the trees are green. They look a bit scorched, I suppose. I mean, there's some trees that are dead, but the trees are still alive. So why is that? What's going on there? You would think that if we had a huge wildfire event, everything gets razed. Forests burn. That's just what they do. They've been burning, as Dr. Daniels said, for hundreds, thousands, millennium. Forests have been burning. We're not going to stop forests from burning. That's what happens. We need to work with burning forests. A forest fire itself is not a disaster, although the bear and the deer might think differently. What becomes a disaster is when that forest fire ignites our homes and our communities. Then it spreads into what we could consider a disaster. If a home does not ignite, a home cannot burn. So, the WUI disaster sequence. We start with severe fire conditions. We end up with a wildland fire through lightning, human caused, whatever. We end up with an urban fire because we've got a house that's ignited. That house then spreads to another house because it's too close together or because the embers land on another house. Pretty soon we've got all of our fire department tasks or all of fire department resources tasked to that, and the fire keeps going, and we end up with a disaster because we got no more resources and houses are burning down. Jack Cohen's a retired U.S. Forest Service research scientist. He's been around for a long time, and he's often considered the god in some of these things. And I love this quote: "Community wildfire risk should be defined as a home ignition problem, not a wildfire control problem." If your backyard is looking pretty scorched or the salal's burned off, oh well, it'll grow back in a year or two. If your house is burned down, that's a bigger problem. So this is from the campfire in California in 2018. How did all those homes burn, but many of the trees are still completely green? If it was a huge wall of fire, you would think that everything would be scorched. But we're discovering that it's not really the huge wall of fire, with some exceptions, I might add. John, from his talk last night, showed a huge wall of fire that did pretty much vaporize houses. But by and large, in general, it's not that wall of fire that's burning homes down. It's the embers that are landing on the houses that are igniting houses. So there are embers, or more specifically, the embers are lighting something on fire, and that direct flame is what's burning houses down. So the needles in the gutters, for example, ember lands in the needles in the gutters, perfect vector to go up under the roof, set your house on fire. The mulch along the base of your house, pretty highly flammable in the middle of summer, pretty crispy, that stuff. The long dry grass, the deck furniture that's on your deck, the wooden deck itself, the cedar roof, or maybe the juniper bush that's out in front of your house. Here's another example. The houses are all gone. They're pretty close together, so there'd be a pretty severe exposure hazard there, but many of those trees are still standing. So I got a short video here that Brianna's gonna play. It's only a minute and a half. This shows it's a bit of it is an evacuation out of Fort Mac. It's a bit of an illustration of what we call the gasoline bush issue. There we go.
Sound?
No, there's no sound to it. It went back a little bit further than I was hoping for. Yeah, let's start it there, where your cursor is. There we go.
Oh my goodness.
So there's a huge wall of fire, obviously.
Is this Fort Mac?
Yeah, this is Fort Mac. Maybe you could advance another, say, 1 minute? Brianna? Yeah, let's go right there. Yeah, that's perfect. So the guy on the motorcycle is getting pretty uncomfortable. He wants to get out of there. You can see these houses are fine. Like there's a huge wall of fire there, and the houses are fine. Now I want to point out, right there's a bush. That's an ember that would have come across there, landed in that bush. And we're just going to watch that for a minute and see how that develops. They all pull over, a fire truck goes by. You can see the embers are starting to land. Look at them, they're all over the place. They're landing on the back of the truck, they're landing in the grass, they're landing in the gutters, they're landing on the decks. Now, this is the bush that we're going to watch. It's going to drive away. And we're talking, by the time we're going to end the video, it's going to be 45 seconds. Look at that thing going right now. Little juniper bush. And we're not even near the wall of fire anymore. The wind picks up, all of a sudden that bush is blowing right into the house. That's what's lighting houses on fire. Okay, you can kill that video. Point made. So wildfire is a threat to our community and neighborhoods. That is for sure. Something's going to happen here. Whether it's happening while I'm fire chief or not, who knows? Hopefully not. This threat cannot be solved by bringing in more firefighters or more equipment. It can only be solved by dealing with the hazards in our backyards and in our neighborhoods. So, what are we doing about this? So, at Hornby Island Fire Rescue, we are structural firefighters. Wildfires on Crown land or in parks belong to BC Wildfire Service. So if we end up with something that's on Helliwell Park or up on Mount Jeffrey, my first phone call is to BC Wildfire. They'll give me a task number. They'll first want to know what's going on. I'll give them a rundown of what we've got. They will then assign a crew. They'll give us probably a task number if they think it's safe that we could start actioning it. We will make a start at it if it's still small enough. At a certain point though, we have to pull our crews back and leave that whole fire to wildfire, and we'll go grab our structure protection stuff, and then we will start addressing the structure protection aspect of it. The second call is going to be to the Comox Valley Regional District to declare a local state of emergency. Local state of emergencies then enable us to do evacuations, so we can then clear out neighborhoods, get the whole evacuation process started. Local states of emergency also enable us to do a few other things as well. So the CVRD emergency prep people helped us out putting together an evacuation plan. The evacuation plan contains checklists, potential reception centers, staging areas, roles and responsibilities, contact information, all that type of stuff. There is a public version of that plan, which is available on the HIRA website, might be on the fire department website. You can get it off the CVRD as well. And then there's an operational plan. The only difference between the public accessible one and the operational one is a bunch of the contact information has been redacted. But if you can find that plan on the website, that's the one we're working with. And we're going to be doing an update of that in the next year or so.
What's it called, Doug?
I think if you look for Hornby Island evacuation plan, you can find that. Big wildfire events are pretty new to us on the coast. As structural firefighters, our training has always been about putting out structure fires, car fires, doing trail rescues, medical responses, motor vehicle incidents, hazmat scenes, all that type of stuff that your local fire departments do. In the last decade, we've been forced to pivot, looking after how to deal with wildfires. And some of that is just even defining what our role is. If BC Wildfire owns the fire, where does that leave us? What it does leave us is structural defense and structural protection. So structural defense is driving around a crew in a fire apparatus through a neighborhood looking for spot fires, looking for problem spots, looking for maybe after the fire front passes, going around and putting out little fires that we see. Structure protection is a crew going around and putting up sprinklers, knocking over the wood piles that we saw in those other spots. Maybe we can tape off some vents, all that type of thing where we know embers are going to go through into a vent or they're going to land on a wood pile. We can knock that stuff off and then hopefully save a house. The Engine Boss course, that's a training that teaches fire officers the tactics involved in leading a team of firefighters doing those neighborhood patrols that I just talked about. I've taken the course, and we've got 2 more that we hope to put through in the spring it was a bad fire year, so a lot of the courses that we wanted to send people on got canceled fairly early in the process. The structure protection training is tactics for all firefighters for protecting homes using sprinklers or some things that don't really involve water either. We had Gord Schreiner, who's a structure protection specialist. He's also the fire chief for Comox. He came over for a weekend and gave us a weekend course on how to do some of those things. EOC training. We've sent 2 of our officers off on EOC training. EOC is Emergency Operations Center. So an emergency operations center is a setup. For us, it's going to be at the Comox Valley Regional District. You don't necessarily want your EOC to be right on scene. It's just a bit too chaotic. If you can separate it a little bit, that often works a little bit better. Our people probably won't be serving on the EOC, but having that knowledge of how it all works is only going to improve communications and make things a little bit less chaotic in that first operational period, which is just crazy. And local FireSmart representatives, I've taken the course, we've got another person who's taken the course, and so as people sign up to do FireSmart assessments to learn how to make their homes a little bit safer in the case of a wildfire, we'll send one of us over to have a look and suggest a whole bunch of ways that you can maybe keep your house from burning down. In 2006, we had Strathcona Forest Consulting. They helped us create a community wildfire protection plan. Out of that plan came 28 recommendations. We've been slowly working through those recommendations and we've made some pretty significant impacts. Some of the things that have come out of that plan are relationship building with BC Wildfire and other agencies, the chipper program that has seen such great uptake over the last few years, the fuel mitigation work that BC Parks is currently doing in Helliwell, FireSmart assessments, achieving the Superior Tanker Shuttle accreditation, increased fire patrols on the beaches and the various spots on the island. Those are all items that came out of that plan. There's still a lot of work to do, especially in the areas of fuel reduction on Mount Jeffrey, improving vehicle access on Mount Jeffrey for fire apparatus, and establishing fire breaks along Coltsfoot Trail, and possibly considering prescribed burns as well. We've been sending some people off on deployment, so what better prep can there be than to go somewhere where there's actually a fire going, work with the agencies and work with the structure that's already in place, and then bring that information, that education, that experience back to our community. Again, working along the theme of reducing the chaos in that first operational period. That's an excellent way of doing it. So every year we sent a couple of people off. We've paired up with Oyster River Fire. Oyster River has a spare apparatus that they can send on deployment. We can't send any of our apparatus, but we have a bunch of people who are willing, we've sent off on training courses, and they're willing to go off on deployment. So every time we send somebody off, that's great information that comes back to the community. And structure protection equipment. We've taken advantage of several provincial grants to build up a functioning structure protection trailer. All of the equipment, including the trailer, was purchased with provincial grants. There's a lot more to require before I'll be 100% happy with it, but right now we've got a pretty good set of equipment that we can use to protect a neighborhood. So what can you do? We talked to, Dr. Daniels talked a little bit about this in her talk. Again, going back to the point where if homes don't ignite, homes don't burn. I want to give, before I get too much further, a shout out to Jan and Pat Kennedy and the Giroux Road neighborhood, who has started organizing their own neighborhood FireSmart protection sort of setup to make their homes a little bit less vulnerable to fire. Because FireSmarting works well if you FireSmart your home. What works better is if you FireSmart your neighborhood. So to put all this together and to answer the question that you asked me to come and talk about, how prepared are we? We are a lot more prepared than we were 5 years ago. We're making good progress, but there's so much more that we need to do. It's going to involve community discussions around the areas of prescribed burning and fuel reduction. It'll involve neighborhood discussions about FireSmart. And there's a lot more training and a lot more equipment and a lot more awareness that still has to happen. Just like with the FireSmart principles, it's all about incremental steps. You're not going to get it all done in 1 year. It's going to take years. It's a long game. In fact, it'll never be over. Fires are going to keep going, and they're going to keep getting more intense. The sooner we can get after this and get things started, the better we are prepared going into the future. I know we're just about at the end, but I'm willing to take any questions.
maybe not so much a question, but more like about like the community evacuation plan. I'm thinking about the campfire that you mentioned earlier, and that was really devastating for the community because the roads were so narrow, and a lot of people didn't sign up for the evacuation texts. So like, how can we get that knowledge to our community members so people know where to go if something happens? Like, there's only one road into a lot of neighborhoods, like on the mountain or like St. John's Point, and just like blips on the radio for like different neighborhoods, like just to like have little snippets of that information more widely available so people know, especially in the summer when we have so many people here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The trick with getting too prescriptive about where the reception centers are going to be is when the fire has cut off a neighborhood from where the reception center is. So we've identified 4 possible reception centers around the island and several evacuation routes, but we can't really say if you're in Whaling Station and you get an evacuation notice, this is where you have to go, because potentially your route could be cut off. So some of the methods that we will have of notifying people are the local radio, the CBC radio, basically any of the Valley radio stations. The alerts for anybody who's signed up with the CVRD Connect system, and I would encourage everybody to go to the CVRD website to get your notifications. And also driving around with a truck with the loudspeaker on, letting people know. Those are some of the things we got, but also, you know, it's a good point. Perhaps a really condensed, compact version of the evacuation plan might be the way to do it, because right now it's 130 pages of information, so it's a bit of a dense read. So maybe come up with something a little bit smaller to disseminate to everybody might be a good option.
Okay, one more question, and then we're going to go to the pen.
Peter?
In terms of fuel reduction on Mount Jump, it's about 700 acres or something like that?
Yeah, just a small little place.
Yeah.
Should be no
Quite a
problem.
bit of manpower, any something given how that can be accomplished? I know there's a lot of paper poles standing dead up there.
Yeah, there's some provincial money available for that. I haven't dove too deep into that yet. I feel like the community is just now kind of coming around to the idea. There's been a lot of resistance to that in past years, and I think it's time to re-up those conversations again. So with a certain amount of buy-in from the community, I think we can go back to the province and start to act on some of the plans that had come out in that community wildfire protection plan.
Okay. Thank you very much.